I'm a god.
Well, what if there is no tomorrow?
I'm a god.
There wasn't one today.
Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast stuck in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. In this season, we're taking a look at Groundhog Day, after day, after day, after day, after day. I'm your host, Bubba Wheat from Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights, and in this episode, we're discussing Phil's 23rd Groundhog Day that starts at 59 minutes and 25 seconds with Sonny and Cher on the clock radio, and ends at 59 minutes and 37 seconds with Phil smashing the radio with his fist. For the last time here, my guest once again is Heather from the MILFcast. How are you doing today?
Bubba, I've got you, Bubba. It's nice to be back again. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. It's been a fun, series of episodes. I always have a hard time discussing the timeline because this is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday release, but I always think of it as, the next episode is tomorrow, even though it's, 2 or 3 days later.
Well, it's eventually going to be tomorrow.
Unless it's Groundhog Day.
This
Again.
is true. This is true. This is very true. Good point. I'm not going to Punxsutawney ever anyway. By the way, guys, ever. I'm going to always avoid it at all possible costs, just in case. Just in case.
Yeah, I don't see myself ever going there either. It's as much as I've done, or I will have done 36 episodes, I think 38 episodes about the movie Groundhog Day. I think, once I'm done with it, I'll just stick to watching the movie again every once in a while, but I'll be ready to walk away from the Groundhog Day after this is all said and done.
I can't say I blame you not wanting to actually visit the town. I think you've thoroughly done your research and experienced all that there is Groundhog Day. I am curious, though, how many times have you, I think you asked this in the time group, how many times have you actually watched the movie?
I'm not a huge movie rewatcher, and like I mentioned before, I don't have the best memory of my own personal life. I know I've seen it several times, but I would probably estimate just around maybe 5 or 6 times.
I think that's what most people have said. I don't as much now that I'm older. Mostly it's a time factor. I don't rewatch movies as much as I used to. But when I was younger and in my early 20s as a teenager, I would rewatch the crap out of movies. I've probably seen Tremors 100, 150 times. I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm not. And this is one of those movies that I had to sit there and think. I know I've seen a ridiculous amount of time. It was a movie that was on at home a lot, that we watched as a family, that all 4 of us enjoyed. But it's also been one of those movies that if it ever pops up and is on TV, I'm always going to give it a stop. It doesn't matter at what point it's in, I've always turned it on. If I had to put together how many times I've actually seen it, I would probably say somewhere close to 15 to 20. But I probably haven't watched it in the last 2 years. It was nice to come back and revisit.
Now, I honestly can't remember the last time I watched the movie. I think it's probably been at least 5 years since I've seen it start to finish. Like, I did watch a whole lot of bits and pieces as I was cutting the film into different days, but whenever I was doing that, I never actually did sit down and watch it start to finish. And then as I've been recording, I've just been watching the specific days before doing the recordings. I was going to wait until after, either right before the last episode or right after the last episode recording, to go back and watch the movie again, start to finish.
Oh, that's a great idea. You might have a newfound appreciation for it.
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience. Like, it was helpful that I did at least watch bits and pieces of later in the movie, so that way whenever things popped up earlier on, I could, notice, oh yeah, that does come back later in the movie. But it's been an interesting experience just sticking with the day at a time.
I think it's really cool. I think it's really cool that you did this. And something I've noticed too that I've enjoyed with podcasts more recently is I've noticed that I've noticed a lot of people focusing on one movie and kind of breaking them down like this, which is really cool. But I've also noticed a lot of people are doing shorter episodes, like doing 15 to 20-minute episodes of shows that are just specific little bits or like quick reviews and that kind of thing. And I'm really enjoying it. Sometimes it's really hard for me to commit to sitting down for 40 minutes to an hour and a half listening to something. And I do a lot of shower listens. I take my little speaker in the shower with me and we'll catch up on podcasts. And, that whole entire period for me lasts maybe 15 minutes in there max. I don't have time to shower. I don't like to shower. I schedule my showers. So I get about 15 minutes in there. So it's perfect for an episode and a show like this too. I just really like it. I think it's fantastic and cool. And I'm really glad you did it.
Yeah, I used to really enjoy the longer podcast episodes that, some shows would go for like an hour and a half to 2 hours talking about a movie, or just having a conversation in general where they would go on multiple various tangents and all that stuff. But now I do prefer the shorter episodes. But then I've kind of gone back a little bit where I like some of the deeper dives that, like, for me, I listen while I'm at work for the most part, because I'm a tech in an arcade. So a lot of my work is really just me by myself. Like, I'm around people, but I'm focused on just doing what I need to do. I finally got like the Bluetooth earbuds, so I can just have it in one ear, so that way I'm still aware, like people can come talk to me, and I'm not like just completely zoned out in the world. But I've been listening to more podcasts again, which is nice.
It's fantastic. I've heard a lot of people say they do that kind of thing with work. I know my brother does. He's always ahead of all the podcasts I listen to by months, and will say, "Hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" I'm like, because I want to give it my attention, and I can't do that during the day with my job. But that's what he does while he's at work. He keeps one earbud in, and the other ear open, and he listens to podcasts while he works. And I think that's fantastic. It's a great way to pass time, but still be able to do your job efficiently.
Yeah, and then getting back to Groundhog Day and today's loop, today feels like gets he steps up the aggression against the clock and, physically smashes it with his fist. And he does quite a bit of damage just with his fist and punching it.
Yes, but I felt satisfied. I don't know if you did. I felt satisfied for Phil at this point. This is definitely built up. If anything, I'm kind of surprised we didn't see it being smashed sooner. But this works much better from where we started with this hierarchy of basically him starting off in the state of depression, however many loops ago, where he's finally started to kind of give up. And now this is where things are going to shift again. And this is a really, really great way to transition that. We're seeing that he is no longer, if the clock does indeed represent the power of the loop, then he's rebelling against it once again. He's no longer accepting his futility, or if in any way, shape, or form he's trying to rage against the power that's holding him there.
Rage against the dying of the batteries in in the clock radio, because it is a cordless radio, which we haven't mentioned before.
Well, I don't think we had an opportunity to see it prior to this either, that it was cordless, which is why I was surprised that it still was, because it is an old clock. And I think part of the reason I think you were accurate in earlier loops too about the showing that a lot of the stuff was dated in the hotel that Phil's staying in. But there's something to be said too for the clock actually flipping over and watching it flip and switch and know that the day is starting again. It's a great little bit of focus. And you even when the film came out, which I think was in what, 92, 93?
93.
93. Those, we had digitalized clocks by then. We all had the glowy ones that made the horrible beep 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 noise that will traumatize me for the end of my life.
I always have that alarm. Always, whenever I hear that specific type of alarm, it always brings my mind back to the Tick animated series.
Oh, I've wanted to see that.
Because that's exactly what kicks off that theme song. It's like you have that beep beep beep, and then it goes into da dwee da 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 dwee dow da ba da ba da ba.
I never watched it. I've had it recommended to me recently, in fact, that I should go back and check that out. So that's funny. But again, too, going back to Groundhog Day here, that's kind of what we see is. I wonder about now with kids today if they would even recognize this old clock. But I think it's cool that they used that. And we go back to a time before where you hear Sonny and Cher too. It's like almost being stuck in another timeline.
Yeah, and I do have, like I mentioned, a bit of research that I did about this clock. It is a recreation of a Panasonic RC 6025 radio alarm clock, and it came out in the late 70s. I believe 76 was whenever it first came out. And for most of the close-ups, they were prop clocks, and specifically in today's scene, during the close-up, you can see the 59 and the 60 repeated. Like you can kind of see that behind the 00 card, you can see the top of the 59 again. And that's because for the prop clock that they used, it just repeated 5:59 and 6 o'clock over and over again. So that way, because with those style of clocks, in order to set it, like if you wanted to set it from 6 o'clock to 5:59, you would have to spin the dial all the way around for 24 hours.
Oh, yeah, what a
to get
bloody
back to
pain in the tushy.
And I also watched a YouTube video that's discussed this style of clock from a channel called Technology Connections. And it was interesting because even though it feels like a digital clock, it's actually much more like an analog clock, like the dial, where each of the dials is there's like a dial for the minutes and a dial for the hour.
Yeah.
And as it slowly turns, it eventually flips them, and it's like the dials are on a big Rolodex of the numbers. And also in most of the close-ups, you don't see there's a secondary catch because those clocks aren't really that accurate on when they would flip, and they wouldn't, the way that they're set up, they wouldn't both flip the hour and the minute at the exact same time just because of the way that they were designed. So they had a secondary catch for the hour hand, and so the hour hand would actually flip the first catch about 5 minutes before it actually was ready to flip, and then it would land on the secondary catch, and then that would be released through the 59 minute. Whenever it flips, it would release the secondary catch. So that way they would both flip at the exact same time.
That's kind of cool. And arduous.
And also, like, the dial to set the time was also not exactly very accurate. So it would be unlikely that the alarm would go off at exactly 6 o'clock.
Well, there were probably supernatural factors in effect here, and I think we can agree on at least that. But I think it's cool that the clock itself actually had to go through a 24-hour span with its turning, which kind of gives it a little bit more of a connection to the fact that you're on this 24-hour time loop. as well. So that's kind of neat. That's really cool.
And then, we talked about how long you thought that Phil was stuck in the Groundhog Day to this point in the movie. But how long do you think he was stuck, throughout the entire movie, through the end?
In my mind, I wanted to say like a full year because I feel like that would make some kind of sense. But I feel like after this particular scene that things do start to go a little bit faster. But it's after this that he starts to learn things, and he has to take a lot of time in that too. I'm gonna go with if I think at this point he was at about 6 or 7 months, and I'm going to say the entirety is probably somewhere near 10 months.
So far, that's the shortest guess that anybody's given. So
I feel my instinct says to say it's been a full year, but if I'm trying to actually logistically play out the events and how long the implications are, I would say 10. I would say 10 to 12 months would be my guess. But it has to be at least. I feel like it has to be a year. Of course, we'll never know.
Right. And there's been a lot of other people that have done their own estimations based on what he's learned, and the writer and the director have both said different things as well. So it's not and at least the director has passed on already, so we'll never get any more information from him.
Yeah, unfortunately. Brilliant guy.
And then, the other thing that I ask everybody that I haven't gotten around to yet is, we see a lot of days that Phil goes through during his time in Groundhog Day, but there's also a lot of days, even in a shorter 10 months, based on your guess, that we don't get to see. So what would be one of his days that you would have liked to have seen make it? Well, maybe not even necessarily make it into the movie, but you would have liked to have seen as like a deleted scene or something like that.
A deleted scene that has no place in this movie whatsoever and would have make no sense whatsoever, but would have just been to validate my little fantasy bubble, would be Phil and Phil playing golf together and making the course explode as an ode to Caddyshack. That's it. Very, very simple. And it wouldn't make any sense for the movie at all.
Of course not, but that's perfect.
But it'll be funny.
Well, I think we'll leave this as, at least I think it's a bit shorter of an episode than our previous ones, but unless you had anything else that you wanted to mention.
I think I'm good. I've went on plenty of tangents that were unnecessary, so I can leave it right here.
All right, well, it's been a real pleasure to have you on. I'm glad that you were able to make it. So for one last time, why don't you go ahead and remind everybody where they can find you online?
You can find Kai's and my show, the Manila Fun Podcast. We stream twice a week on Twitch. You can find us at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Sundays and Wednesdays. We talk about silly stuff, and sometimes we talk about movies. Last week we talked about Star Wars. It was great. But we like to have a good time. And if you don't have time to sit down and watch a show, we post all the episodes on YouTube afterwards, too. So you can totally pause us in weird face-making moments and screenshot it and send them to us at themilfcast@gmail.com. And I'll totally post them on our socials for us if you want to do that. And otherwise, you can find us on socials at MILFcast on Instagram and Facebook.
And as always, I'm Bubba Wheat, and you can find me at flightstitesandmovienights.com. You can find me on Twitter at Bubba Wheat, and you can follow the show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else you can listen to podcasts. You can join our Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, where you can discuss the shows or anything related to time loops in general. And I am going to go out and find an alarm clock repair shop so I can go get my alarm clock repaired after Phil has smashed it.
I'm a god.
Well, what if there is no tomorrow?
I'm a god.
There wasn't one today.